There are moments in life when you feel the air shift, not outside you, but within. The laughter that once filled your evenings now feels hollow. The people you once chased seem distant, and even your own dreams begin to wear new colors. This isn't confusion. This is growth. You are shedding an old skin that no longer fits your spirit. You are standing on the edge of your own evolution. So before you turn away or label it as loneliness, I want you to stay, because what you're feeling might be one of the 5 sacred signs that you've outgrown your old self. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand not just how much you've changed, but how far you were always meant to go. There comes a moment in your journey when you begin to notice that the conversations that once fed you no longer taste the same. You sit among familiar faces, hear the same laughter, the same stories told 100 times before, and suddenly something inside you feels out of rhythm. It isn't arrogance, and it isn't distance. It's awakening. You've started to see through words, through masks, through noise. You've begun to crave meaning. The old rhythm of your life played loudly, full of chatter and applause, but now your soul hums a different tune. The silence after a deep question feels richer than the longest conversation filled with nothing at all. You are no longer content with words that float on the surface. You are diving toward the depth where truth lives. Once you would nod along just to belong. You would laugh at jokes that didn't touch your heart, listen to gossip that didn't sit right with your spirit, and agree to ideas that felt too small for the size of your soul. You did it because you didn't want to seem different, because fitting in felt like safety. But now you feel that tug, that quiet discomfort when the talk turns hollow. You can feel your energy shrinking when someone speaks only to complain or compare or criticize. The air grows heavy with words that mean nothing. You smile politely, but your heart whispers, "I don't belong here anymore." That whisper isn't judgment, it's direction. It's the universe gently guiding you toward rooms where your spirit can breathe again. You begin to notice that your silence speaks louder than your old conversations ever did. You listen more now, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've realized not everything deserves your voice. You used to rush to fill every silence, fearing that quiet meant disconnection. Now you've learned that silence can be sacred, a sign that you are at peace with yourself, that you no longer need noise to feel seen. The moments that used to feel empty now feel full of meaning, because you understand that stillness is where wisdom hides. Growth often looks like disinterest. It looks like sitting in the same circle but feeling miles away. It looks like hearing stories that once entertained you but now leave you yearning for more purpose, more honesty, more soul. And sometimes that makes others uncomfortable. They might say you've changed, and they're right. You've grown beyond the surface of your old conversations. You are no longer trying to sound right. You are trying to be real. You no longer talk to fill space. You talk to build bridges. You no longer speak to prove your worth. You speak to share your truth. There was a time when your energy chased everything that sparkled. Every opinion mattered. Every voice had power over you. You lived for approval, for validation dressed as conversation. But then life started to teach you, through heartbreak, through solitude, through failure, that approval fades, but authenticity stays. You learned that the loudest rooms often echo with emptiness, and the quiet ones often hold the most light. You discovered that peace doesn't come from being understood by everyone, but from understanding yourself deeply. When you no longer fit in the same conversations, you may feel lonely at first. It's a strange kind of loneliness, not because you're alone, but because your spirit has moved to a higher floor. The people you used to connect with may still be downstairs, chatting about the same things, and you want to join them. You try to step back, but your heart feels heavy. You try to pretend that you still belong there, but your mind has already outgrown the walls. You're not leaving them behind. You're simply honoring where your soul is trying to take you. And slowly, you begin to find new conversations. They're softer, deeper, filled with presence instead of performance. You find yourself drawn to people who talk about healing, not hurting, growth, not gossip, people who pause before they speak because they care about the energy their words carry, people who dream loudly, love openly, and listen without judgment, conversations that leave you inspired, not drained. People who remind you that connection isn't about how much you talk, but how deeply you feel when you do. This shift doesn't happen overnight. There will be moments when you miss the easy laughter, the comfort of familiarity. You might wonder if you've become too serious, too distant. But then you'll have a conversation with someone who truly sees you, someone who doesn't just hear your words but feels your silence, and you'll realize you were never meant to stay small just to be accepted. Growth demands honesty, and honesty often clears the room. When you stop fitting into the same conversations, it's not because you're better than anyone else. It's because your soul is asking for alignment. It's because you've tasted the truth of who you are, and you can't unlearn it. You start to realize that every conversation is an exchange of energy, and you no longer give yours away carelessly. You protect your peace the way you once protected your ego. You choose where your words land because you understand their power. The conversations that once excited you now seem to circle the same mountain, but your spirit, your ever-growing, ever-reaching spirit, wants to climb higher. It wants to talk about purpose, healing, gratitude, creation, forgiveness. It wants to breathe in the air of what's real. You find yourself moved by the unseen, by the stillness between words, by the warmth behind a pause, by the beauty of listening with intention. You realize that you no longer need to win debates or dominate discussions. You are content with simply understanding, and that's the kind of quiet strength that shakes the world. You may lose people on this path, but you won't lose love. The right souls will hear your new language. They'll meet you in the middle of your silence and know exactly what you mean. And one day, you'll look back on the conversations that once defined you and smile, not because they were meaningless, but because they were the foundation on which your depth was built. You'll thank every room that couldn't hold you, every table that became too small, every voice that stopped resonating, because all of them led you here, to the version of yourself that no longer needs to pretend to belong. So when you find yourself sitting quietly, surrounded by noise that no longer nourishes you, don't shrink back into your old shape. Don't apologize for your silence or your shift. You are not detached, you are discerning, you are not cold, you are conscious. The world you once spoke to is still beautiful, but now your voice has grown wiser, your spirit louder, your truth deeper. And that, my friend, is how you know you've outgrown the conversations that once kept you small. There comes a time in every life when the noise of the world begins to fade, and in that gentle quiet, something extraordinary happens. You realize that peace feels better than attention. Once, you lived for the applause. You waited for validation to crown you worthy, for someone's approval to confirm your value. You stretched yourself thin to be seen, shaped yourself to fit expectations, smiled when you wanted to cry, spoke when silence would have been truer. You thought that being noticed meant being loved, that being admired meant being enough. But one day, something inside you shifted. You discovered that peace, that still, unshakable calm that lives beyond noise, feels softer, safer, and far more beautiful than any spotlight ever could. Attention is loud. It demands performance. It keeps you chasing, adjusting, pleasing. It's fleeting, fragile, and conditional. It stays as long as you sparkle, but fades when your light grows quiet. Peace, however, asks for nothing. It doesn't need you to prove yourself, to wear a mask, or to compete for space. Peace is quiet, but it's honest. It's not found in the eyes of others, but in the steadiness of your own heartbeat. Once you've tasted peace, attention starts to feel like hunger, an endless craving that never truly satisfies. There was a time when you equated love with being seen. You wanted to be the one they talked about, the one who mattered in every room. You measured your worth in reactions, in how many people cared, in how many noticed your absence. But slowly, you realized that attention is not intimacy. It's not understanding. It's not connection. People can admire you and never know you. They can cheer for your strength and still not understand your pain. You began to see that the world claps for the image, not the soul, and you grew tired of performing. Peace entered when you stopped performing. It came softly, like dawn creeping over the edges of a long night. It came when you stopped explaining yourself to those determined not to listen. It came when you stopped arguing to be understood. It came when you allowed silence to speak for you. You found that real peace doesn't need to be loud or proven. It simply exists, calm, rooted, and radiant. It's the exhale after years of pretending to be fine. It's the deep breath after letting go of everything that was never truly yours. Peace feels like freedom. It's the freedom to walk away without bitterness, to rest without guilt, to love without fear. It's the freedom to not attend every argument you're invited to not respond to every misunderstanding, to not chase after every opinion. You realize that your peace is worth more than being right, more than being adored, more than being admired. You stop choosing drama over dignity. You stop seeking validation and start seeking alignment. You stop running toward noise and start walking toward stillness. In that stillness, you begin to heal. You realize how much of your energy was spent trying to be everything for everyone. You see how many nights you lost sleep replaying conversations, defending your name in the corners of your own mind. But now you sleep deeply, not because the world finally understands you, but because you finally understand yourself. You no longer need to be chosen because you've chosen peace. And that choice has already filled every empty space within you. There was a season in your life when silence scared you. It felt like rejection, like invisibility. You mistook the absence of attention for the absence of worth, but now you know that peace isn't absence, it's presence. It's the presence of self, the presence of clarity, the presence of something deeper than applause, acceptance. You've learned that you can lose everything you once used to impress the world and still have everything you need to impress your own soul. Peace changes your rhythm. You move slower now, but with purpose. You don't rush to respond, you pause to reflect. You no longer speak to prove, but to connect. You don't post for attention, you share for truth. And that small shift, that gentle turning from outer validation to inner serenity, transforms everything. The world may call it indifference, but you know it's wisdom, because you've learned that not every noise deserves your focus, and not every invitation deserves your presence. Peace has a quiet glow. It doesn't shout, it doesn't sparkle, it simply radiates. You can see it in the way someone carries themselves: calm eyes, soft voice, steady heart. You begin to notice that peace attracts what attention cannot. It brings people who value energy over image, sincerity over spectacle. It calls in opportunities that align with your purpose, not your performance. Peace doesn't chase, it invites. It doesn't demand, it allows. When you stop craving attention, you stop betraying yourself. You no longer say yes when your heart says no. You no longer smile through pain to keep others comfortable. You no longer compromise your peace for the illusion of importance. You learn that being at peace with yourself is the highest form of success, and no applause can compete with that kind of fulfillment. The world may forget your name, but peace will remember your soul. And there will be moments when the old hunger returns. You might scroll through a world still chasing the glitter, still measuring worth in numbers and noise. You might feel the pull, the urge to be seen again, to be relevant, to be recognized. But then you'll remember the exhaustion of performing, the hollowness of applause, the weight of pretending. You'll remember how peace felt, like soft morning light after a long storm. And you'll stay there, quietly grateful for the stillness that no crowd could ever give you. Peace also brings clarity about what truly matters. You begin to cherish simplicity. A walk in nature feels more healing than any grand event. Honest conversation feels richer than any spotlight. A quiet cup of tea alone feels sacred. You learn to listen to your own breath, your own heartbeat, your own intuition. You begin to protect your boundaries, not out of fear, but out of respect for the calm you worked so hard to build. You realize that attention is borrowed, but peace is owned. Attention feeds your ego, but peace feeds your soul. And so you guard it, you build your days around it. You say no without guilt. You disconnect without apology. You choose environments that nurture calm, people who speak with kindness, moments that keep you grounded. You no longer need to stand out. You are content to stand whole. You no longer need to prove your light. You simply let it shine where it's needed. The kind of peace you found cannot be posted or praised. It can only be felt in the quiet spaces where you meet yourself. You've learned that the world will always have its noise, always clapping for something, always shouting for more. But you've also learned that your spirit doesn't need to keep up. You were never meant to live your life on a stage that demands your exhaustion in exchange for applause. You were meant to live in rhythm with your soul, slow, steady, full of grace. Peace may not make you famous, but it will make you whole. And once you've known that kind of wholeness, no attention in the world can tempt you away from it again. There comes a season in life when solitude no longer feels like punishment. It begins to feel like power. The fear that once haunted you at the thought of being alone slowly transforms into peace. You start to see that walking alone doesn't mean you are lost. It means you are finally walking in the direction of your truth. For so long, you may have tried to belong, to fit, to stay close to what was familiar, even when it hurt. You clung to people who could not understand your silence, to places that no longer reflected your spirit, to dreams that had expired but still felt safe to hold. But the day comes when you release the hand that doesn't reach back, and in that sacred moment, you discover the strength of standing on your own feet. That first step alone is the hardest. It feels like free fall. But what you don't see yet is that freedom waits at the bottom. You begin to understand that loneliness and solitude are not the same. Loneliness is a hunger for others, but solitude is a homecoming to yourself. When you first start walking alone, the quiet feels heavy, almost unbearable. The world grows still, and every sound of absence echoes louder. But as you continue, something begins to shift. You start to hear your own thoughts clearly for the first time. You begin to recognize your own voice, the one that was always drowned out by others' opinions, by the noise of the world, by the expectations that kept you small. You realize that walking alone is not about isolation, it's about liberation. It's about reclaiming the power you once gave away, the peace you once traded for company, and the clarity you once silenced to keep the crowd comfortable. For years, you may have feared that if you stood alone, you would fade. But in truth, it is in your solitude that your light burns brighter. When there is no one else's reflection to shape you, you begin to see yourself clearly. You no longer bend to fit into conversations, relationships, or dreams that don't align with your truth. You stop chasing people who keep leaving, and you stop apologizing for needing more. You stop begging for attention from those who only offer you fragments. You stop waiting for someone else to save you from your silence. You finally learn that your company is not a consolation prize, it is a blessing. There will be days when the path feels long and uncertain. You will look back at the places you've left, the laughter, the memories, the comfort of being surrounded by noise, and your heart will ache. Growth always carries grief. You will miss the old versions of yourself, the ones who tried so hard to be loved even when it cost peace. But you'll also remember the weight of that pretending. You'll remember how exhausting it was to constantly explain your worth, to beg for the smallest pieces of affection, to remain in rooms where your spirit was shrinking. And you will choose your peace again, even when it's quiet, even when it's lonely. Because once you've tasted the strength of walking alone, dependency no longer feels like love. It feels like surrender. There's a kind of beauty that only reveals itself when you're alone. You start to notice things that you missed before, the sound of your own laughter when no one else is around, the comfort of your own company, the freedom of not having to perform for acceptance. You begin to fall in love with your own presence. You learn that you don't need to fill every silence with words, that stillness doesn't mean emptiness. You can sit in the quiet and feel whole. You realize that your worth doesn't increase when someone chooses you, and it doesn't decrease when they leave. You learn that walking alone doesn't mean no one loves you. It means you've stopped chasing love that asks you to shrink. When you are no longer afraid to walk alone, you begin to see relationships differently. You stop clinging to what is half-hearted. You stop mistaking attachment for affection. You stop chasing connections that feel heavy. Instead, you begin to attract people who meet you in your peace. People who don't need to complete you because they see that you are already whole. You realize that being alone doesn't mean being without love. It means being free enough to choose the love that truly aligns with your soul. You stop begging for company just to fill the silence and start demanding presence that nourishes your spirit. At first, others might not understand your solitude. They might call it distance, pride, or detachment. But you know it's deeper than that. It's healing, it's rebuilding, it's sacred. It's the pause before the next chapter. It's the quiet strength of someone who has learned to hold their own heart. You are no longer seeking validation. You are seeking peace. You are no longer chasing attention. You are chasing purpose. You have learned that the road to self-discovery is often walked alone. And that's exactly why it's so powerful. As you walk, you begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You remember your natural rhythm, your quiet passions, your hidden dreams. You remember that you don't need a crowd to feel alive. You begin to realize that the solitude you once feared has become your sanctuary. It's where your creativity blooms, where your spirit rests, where your faith deepens. You no longer fear the empty spaces because you filled them with yourself, your strength, your voice, your truth. Walking alone doesn't mean rejecting love or friendship. It means refusing to settle for connections that cost your peace. It means knowing that you can stand alone until something genuine finds you. It means trusting that solitude will never destroy you. It will refine you. You learn that aloneness is not a void to escape, but a mirror to face. It shows you where you've been hiding, what you've been avoiding, and who you're becoming. And though it may be uncomfortable, it is also sacred, because that's where transformation lives. When you are no longer afraid to walk alone, you discover the rare kind of confidence that cannot be shaken by absence. You no longer beg for closure from people who hurt you. You give it to yourself. You no longer seek direction from others. You trust your intuition. You no longer need to be seen to know that you matter. You no longer chase after what left. You walk forward knowing that anything that truly belongs to you will never require you to lose yourself. And then somewhere along this quiet road, you realize that you're not really walking alone at all. Life walks with you, silently, steadily, lovingly. The universe whispers guidance through every step, every breath, every moment of peace you allow yourself to feel. You are surrounded by unseen hands, unseen grace, unseen strength. What once felt like emptiness now feels like divine companionship. You are alone, yes, but never abandoned. You are independent, yes, but deeply connected to something greater. The fear that once told you you'd fall apart without others has turned into faith that tells you you'll rise stronger on your own. The emptiness you once feared has become the space where your spirit expands. You've learned that you can lose people and still find yourself. You can walk away and still be whole. You can stand alone and still shine. Because walking alone was never about isolation. It was always about coming home. And when you arrive there, when you stand in that sacred stillness, you'll realize that solitude was never the absence of love. It was the beginning of it. There comes a moment in the journey of becoming when you stand between two worlds, the one you've outgrown and the one not yet built. It's a strange, tender space where you feel both lost and found. You look around and realize the people, the dreams, the routines that once made sense no longer fit, yet the new ones haven't quite taken shape. You are suspended in between, uncertain, restless, but quietly awakening. It's not a failure or a fall. It's the soul's way of rearranging itself, preparing for what's next. You're no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. And though the in-between feels heavy, it's holy ground. Feeling lost used to terrify you. It meant confusion, weakness, lack of direction. But now you are learning that being lost is often the first sign of being found. When everything familiar starts to fade, it's because your spirit has outgrown its old cage. You may look at your life and not recognize it. The people you used to connect with feel distant. The passions you once burned for no longer light the same fire. The plans you made don't pull you anymore. It's as though your heart has turned its compass toward something unseen. You may not yet know where you're going, but deep down, you know you can't go back. That knowledge alone is a beginning. In this season, you'll feel both clarity and confusion, peace and chaos, faith and doubt. One moment, you'll feel strong, certain that you're on the right path. The next, you'll question everything, wondering if you've lost your way. But this is how transformation speaks. Not through straight lines, but through spirals. Growth rarely arrives wrapped in certainty. It comes wrapped in mystery. The feeling of being lost is the echo of your soul expanding, stretching toward a larger version of itself. It's the feeling of breaking free from what was too small to hold your spirit. You begin to notice that the things that used to excite you no longer hold power over you. The noise of the world begins to sound different, not because it has changed, but because you have. You crave meaning now, not distraction. You crave truth, not attention. You crave rest, not approval. The old motivations that used to drive you, recognition, validation, belonging, start to fade. It confuses you at first. You wonder why nothing feels the same, why you no longer find joy in what once lit you up. But this is not emptiness, it's renewal. The soil of your spirit is being cleared, for new seeds to be planted. You are both lost and found because you are shedding. You're losing your old patterns, your old fears, your old ways of seeing yourself. You're releasing the voices that told you who to be and rediscovering the quiet truth beneath them. That rediscovery is what it means to be found, not by the world, but by yourself. You're meeting the parts of you that have waited patiently beneath all the layers. The child who dreamed freely, the soul that trusted naturally, the heart that once believed without proof. You are not lost, my friend. You are simply walking back to the person you were before the world told you who you had to be. Sometimes this season feels like standing in fog. You can only see a few steps ahead. You can't plan too far, can't predict, can't control. All you can do is keep moving, keep trusting that each small step will reveal the next. You learn to live moment by moment, breath by breath. You stop demanding clarity and start practicing faith. You start to understand that not knowing doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're alive. You begin to surrender your timeline, your expectations, your need to have all the answers. You begin to rest in the uncertainty, trusting that life knows where it's taking you, even when you don't. You feel both lost and found because you are being rewritten. The universe is editing your story, removing characters, changing scenery, altering dialogue. It's uncomfortable, even painful at times. You grieve the old chapters, the old versions of yourself, the old certainties that gave you comfort. But slowly, you start to notice that the new pages are blank for a reason. They're waiting for your truth to fill them. You begin to write again, not from fear or pressure, but from honesty. You start creating from who you are now, not who you were. And that's when the feeling of being found begins to bloom, quietly, like morning light after a long night. You also begin to realize that being lost is necessary for empathy. When you don't have all the answers, you learn to listen more deeply. When you've wandered through uncertainty, you understand others who are wandering too. You stop judging and start connecting. You learn to hold space for people who are still searching because you know what it feels like to be unsure and still brave. You become softer, kinder, more real. That softness, that gentle awareness, is the first sign that your lostness has turned into wisdom. There will be moments when you look around and see others moving with clear direction while you stand still. You'll wonder if you've fallen behind, if you've missed something. But remember, growth isn't always visible. Sometimes it happens underground where no one can see it. You may look still, but inside your roots are reaching deeper. You are learning patience, trust, resilience. You are learning to walk by faith, not by sight. You are learning that the destination doesn't define the journey, the becoming does. In this in-between, you will find pieces of yourself scattered like stars. A new strength here, a forgotten dream there, a spark of courage where fear used to live. Each one is a sign that you're not as lost as you think. You're just rediscovering the path your soul was always meant to walk. The confusion is not chaos, it's construction. The emptiness is not absence, it's preparation. The silence is not abandonment, it's alignment. You are being found piece by piece, moment by moment, quietly but surely. And somewhere in the midst of all this, you'll notice a shift. The lostness won't feel as frightening. The uncertainty won't feel as heavy. You'll start to see beauty in the fog, meaning in the waiting, peace in the unknown. You'll begin to trust that the feeling of being lost is not a detour, but a doorway. Every step you take, even when you don't know where it leads, will begin to feel sacred. You'll look back and realize that the moments that felt like endings were actually introductions, the beginning of a deeper, truer version of yourself. You will come to understand that to feel both lost and found is to be human. It means you are growing. It means your soul is alive. It means you are shedding illusions and finding essence. You will stop trying to rush your clarity and start respecting your confusion. Because even in the uncertainty, even in the aching in between, there is beauty. You are not off course. You are exactly where you need to be, halfway between who you were and who you are meant to become. And though it may feel like you're wandering, you're not lost at all. You are finding yourself in ways you never imagined. There comes a time when the cracks in your life stop feeling like evidence of failure and begin to look like patterns of grace. You look back at the moments that broke you, the disappointments, the betrayals, the losses, and for the first time, you don't only see pain, you see purpose. You see how every fracture led you closer to the truth of who you are. You see how the endings you once feared became the very soil that helped your roots grow deeper. The beauty in the breaks does not reveal itself right away. It appears slowly, like dawn rising over the ashes. It takes time to understand that being broken is not the opposite of being whole. It's part of the journey toward it. At first, every break feels like destruction. You think something has gone terribly wrong, that life has turned against you. The heartache feels unbearable, the silence deafening, the confusion endless. You question everything, yourself, your worth, your purpose. You wonder how something that once felt so right could end so painfully. You plead for answers, for healing, for the pain to stop. But healing doesn't rush, it unfolds. And in that unfolding, something miraculous happens. You begin to see that the breaking wasn't meant to destroy you, but to reshape you. It was the universe's way of clearing what could no longer stay, even when you didn't have the strength to let it go yourself. You start to notice that every wound left a lesson. The heartbreak that shattered your trust taught you to set boundaries. The disappointment that crushed your spirit taught you resilience. The rejection that bruised your ego taught you self-worth. You realized that pain was never your punishment, it was your teacher. Every time something broke, it broke you open, not down. It allowed more light to enter. The very places you once hid in shame became the places where compassion grew. You stopped seeing yourself as a collection of scars and started seeing yourself as a mosaic, made more beautiful because of what had been broken. There's something sacred about the breaks. They strip you of pretense, of pride, of illusion. They humble you, soften you, awaken you. They remind you that strength isn't about never falling apart. It's about how gently you rise after you do. For so long you thought wholeness meant perfection, but now you understand that real wholeness includes every flaw, every bruise, every healed crack. You've learned that nothing real can be ruined by being broken. What is true, what is meant, what is strong, it survives every storm. The beauty in the breaks lies in what they reveal. They show you who truly stands beside you when the noise fades. They show you what truly matters when everything else falls away. They show you that your worth was never tied to what you lost. The job that ended, the relationship that fell apart, the dream that didn't unfold the way you imagined, all of them were chapters, not your story. The breaks didn't erase your worth, they exposed it. You started to see that your value was never in what you carried, but in what remained when it all fell apart. Your courage, your heart, your will to keep moving. There was a time you prayed for the pain to disappear. Now you thank it for what it revealed. You understand that some lessons can only be learned through heartbreak, that some wisdom can only be earned through loss. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead, you whisper, "What is this teaching me?" That shift, that quiet surrender, is what transforms pain into power. You learn that life doesn't break you out of cruelty, it breaks you out of comfort. Every ending is an invitation to evolve. The breaks have made you softer, yes, but they've also made you stronger. You've learned to bend without breaking completely. You've learned that your spirit, though bruised, is unbreakable. You've learned that tears are not weakness, they are release. You've learned to trust time, to believe that healing doesn't erase the pain, but weaves it into meaning. You've learned that beauty isn't in how perfect your story looks, but in how truthfully you've lived it. You see beauty now in the way your heart keeps beating despite the cracks. You see it in the quiet courage of showing up when everything inside you aches. You see it in your reflection, in the eyes that have seen darkness but still choose light. You realize that you don't have to hide your scars. They are proof of your becoming. You used to cover them, ashamed of the past, wishing you could erase the pain. But now you trace them gently with gratitude, knowing that each one tells a story of survival. Each one is a testament to your resilience. You didn't break beyond repair. You broke open to repair more deeply. The beauty in the breaks is also in how they make room for others. When you've known pain, you learn compassion. You listen differently. You hold space for others more gently because you understand what it means to be held through your own storms. Your breaks become bridges, connecting you to others in their pain, allowing you to share your light not from perfection, but from empathy. You stop pretending to have it all together, and that honesty brings freedom. You realize that vulnerability is strength disguised as softness, and that by showing your cracks, you give others permission to heal too. Sometimes the break itself becomes your blessing. The door that closed forced you to find your true path. The person who left made space for peace. The plan that failed pushed you toward your purpose. The silence that once scared you taught you to listen inward. Life, in its mysterious mercy, never takes without giving. What it removes in comfort, it replaces in clarity. What it shatters in illusion, it rebuilds in truth. You've come to see that every loss carried a hidden gift, even if it took time to unwrap it. And as you keep walking, you notice something beautiful. The breaks no longer define you, they refine you. The pain no longer rules you, it shapes you. You no longer see your story as one of suffering, but one of becoming. You realize that the most beautiful souls you've met, the kindest, the wisest, the most radiant, are the ones who have been broken and rebuilt. You recognize that the cracks are not flaws, but entry points for light. You see that healing was never about returning to who you were, but about remembering who you've always been beneath the hurt. Now, when something breaks, you no longer panic. You breathe. You trust. You understand that every ending carries a beginning, every loss carries wisdom, every fracture carries light. You no longer ask to be unbroken, you ask to be remade. You no longer hide your pain, you honor it. Because you've seen the beauty in the breaks, and you know now that brokenness was never the end of your story. It was the moment you began to see your own strength, your own depth, your own divine ability to rise. The breaks were not your undoing, they were your awakening. There comes a moment in life when you stop chasing validation like it's oxygen. You no longer need applause to feel alive. You no longer twist yourself into smaller versions just to be accepted. You no longer measure your worth by how loudly the world claps. That moment, that quiet, powerful shift, is when you realize you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Not to the ones who doubted you, not to the ones who left, not even to the old version of yourself that thought being enough meant being seen. You begin to understand that real confidence doesn't shout, it breathes in silence. It's the kind of peace that says, I know who I am, and that's enough. Once upon a time, you might have lived for the eyes watching you. Every move, every word, every choice was weighed by how it might appear to others. You wanted to be chosen, to be respected, to be admired. You wanted people to say, "Look at them, they made it." And so you performed. You achieved. You fought battles just to prove you could win them. You explained your heart, defended your dreams, tried to justify your worth to people who had already decided not to see it. And still, even after all that proving, peace remained distant, like a door that never quite opened. But something in you changed. Maybe it was heartbreak that broke your ego open. Maybe it was exhaustion that whispered truth into your tired bones. Or maybe it was wisdom quietly growing in the cracks of your pain. Whatever it was, one day you woke up and realized you're done explaining yourself. You're done auditioning for acceptance. You're done handing out the keys to your peace. You no longer crave to be understood by everyone because you've learned that not everyone is meant to understand you. Some people can only meet you at the depth they've reached themselves. You begin to feel a sacred stillness in your soul. You walk through rooms without needing to be the loudest voice. You accomplish something beautiful and don't rush to post it. You speak your truth not to convince, but simply because it's who you are. You stop rushing to prove your worth because you finally see it, quietly, clearly, unshakably. And when you do, something miraculous happens. The noise fades, the constant comparison, the endless self-doubt, the hunger for validation. They lose their power. You no longer feel behind because you've stopped running a race that was never yours. You used to think success was about recognition, about being seen, but now you understand that real success is being at peace with yourself when no one's watching. It's sleeping soundly at night because your spirit is aligned with your truth. It's showing up as yourself, unfiltered, unapologetic, and letting that be enough. You start to realize that nothing beautiful grows from the soil of insecurity. You can't bloom while begging for approval. You can't breathe while holding your breath for validation. And so you exhale. You release the need to prove. You let go. In that letting go, freedom arrives. You no longer chase attention because you found connection, not with the world, but with yourself. You realize that your peace is not in people's opinions, it's in your own authenticity. You stop explaining why you dream the way you do, why you love who you love, why you choose the paths you choose. You stop needing everyone to agree with your decisions, because peace has become more precious than praise. You've outgrown the urge to convince others of your worth. You'd rather live it quietly than argue it loudly. There's a calm that comes with knowing your truth. You don't react to every misunderstanding. You don't try to correct every false perception. You don't need to prove your kindness by overgiving or your strength by never breaking. You simply are. You know what you bring to the table, and you're no longer afraid to eat alone. You know that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means wisdom. You've learned that peace doesn't come from being right, but from being real. You start noticing how much lighter life feels. The energy you once wasted on proving now goes into becoming. You create not to impress, but to express. You work not to be seen, but to serve your purpose. You love not to be loved back, but because love lives in you. The more you honor who you are, the less you care who notices. You stop rushing toward validation because you understand that your worth was never up for debate. It was only waiting for your recognition. It's a quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself, the kind that doesn't scream, "Look at me," but simply radiates, "I am here." You no longer need to justify your peace. You no longer need to defend your joy. You've learned that some people will misunderstand your healing, call it arrogance, label your boundaries as distance, or your silence as pride. But you know better now. You've learned that you don't need to shrink your light for those who refuse to see. You don't need to dim your joy to make others comfortable. You don't need to explain your growth to those who still live where you left. There was a time you thought letting go of the need to prove meant giving up. But now you see it's the ultimate act of faith. Faith in yourself, faith in your journey, faith in the quiet unfolding of your truth. You trust that the right people will understand you without explanation. You trust that what's meant for you doesn't need convincing. You trust that your peace is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. You've grown into a version of yourself that values presence over performance. You show up not to impress, but to contribute. You speak not to be heard, but to connect. You love not to fill a void, but to share, overflow. The need to prove has been replaced by the desire to live fully, freely, authentically. You don't need to outshine anyone. You just need to be true. And that truth by itself is luminous. The world still tries to pull you back sometimes, with noise, with doubt, with distraction. But now you recognize it for what it is, a test of your peace. You smile and stay grounded. You no longer chase after validation that used to leave you empty. You no longer bend under the weight of opinions that used to crush your confidence. You've learned to be your own reassurance, your own approval, your own peace. You understand now that you have nothing left to prove, not because you've reached perfection, but because you've embraced truth. You're not the same person who needed to be seen. You've already been seen by the only one that matters, yourself. And that realization changes everything. You walk differently now. Your silence speaks louder than your defense ever could. Your energy feels lighter, your smile softer, your presence stronger. You move through life with a quiet grace that says, I am enough. Not because anyone told you so, but because you finally know it in your bones. And once you know that, truly know that, no judgment, no rejection, no opinion can shake it. You no longer need to prove anything because your existence itself is proof. Proof that growth is real, that peace is possible, that self-acceptance is freedom. You've learned that you are not what others say you are. You are what you've survived. You are what you've built from the broken. You are what still shines after everything tried to dim your light. And that is all the proof you'll ever need. There comes a time when gratitude stops being a word you speak and becomes the rhythm of your being. It's no longer something you write in a journal at night or whisper before sleep. It becomes the quiet hum of your days, the undercurrent of your thoughts, the music of your soul. You start seeing blessings where you once saw burdens. You begin to thank life not only for what you have, but for what it has taught you. Gratitude becomes your language, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand that everything has meaning. You didn't always live this way. There was a time when you waited for things to be right before you could feel thankful. You thought happiness had to arrive before gratitude could follow. You wanted the breakthrough before you could thank the struggle, the victory before you could honor the fight. But life has a way of teaching in whispers and storms. It showed you that peace doesn't come from perfection, it comes from appreciation. It showed you that even in the midst of uncertainty, there's always something sacred left to notice. The breath in your chest, the sun through the window, the kindness of a stranger, the strength that didn't leave you. You've learned that gratitude doesn't deny the pain, it holds it differently. It doesn't say, everything is fine. It says, even in the brokenness, I can still find beauty. Gratitude has taught you to look at the same life through softer eyes. The things you used to complain about, you now see as teachers. The people who hurt you, you now thank for revealing your strength. The failures that once humiliated you, you now see as redirections toward purpose. Gratitude changed not your circumstances, but your sight. And once your vision shifted, everything else did too. You start to wake up differently. You notice the way morning light dances on your walls. You breathe a little deeper, move a little slower. You no longer rush through your days trying to get somewhere better because you've realized this moment is already enough. You whisper, "Thank you," not because life is easy, but because you're learning to see it clearly. Every challenge now feels like a chapter in your becoming, not a punishment from the universe. You begin to trust that even the unanswered prayers are guiding you. You've stopped needing constant proof that things will work out because gratitude reminds you they already are, just not always in the way you imagined. Gratitude has softened you. It's made you kinder, gentler, more present. You find yourself listening more and judging less. You understand that everyone is carrying something invisible, and yet here they are, still trying, still showing up. You see beauty in that effort. Gratitude makes you aware of the small miracles we take for granted. Laughter shared, meals eaten, moments survived. It turns ordinary days into sacred ground. You've stopped waiting for something grand to celebrate. You celebrate the quiet, the way your heart keeps healing, the way love keeps finding you in unexpected ways, the way you're still here. When gratitude becomes your language, comparison loses its voice. You stop looking at what others have and start appreciating what's yours. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start whispering, "Thank you for this chance, for this lesson, for this moment." You no longer envy someone else's light because you've learned how to tend to your own. You understand that joy is not about having more, it's about seeing more. Gratitude teaches you that abundance is not measured in possessions, but in presence. It's not what's in your hands, but what's in your heart. You also begin to forgive more easily, not because people always deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Gratitude frees you from bitterness. It reminds you that resentment is a cage and forgiveness is the key. You stop carrying every wound like proof of betrayal and start seeing them as proof of growth. You thank the past not for its comfort, but for its lessons. You thank the pain not for its sting, but for its strength. Gratitude has taught you that every scar has softened you into someone more compassionate, more real, more alive. There's a beauty in how gratitude changes your conversations, too. You no longer speak from lack, but from fullness. You talk less about what's wrong and more about what's right. You praise others without fear that it dims your own light. You find joy in celebrating other people's wins. Gratitude silences the voice of envy because it keeps you anchored in enough. It keeps you grounded in the truth that nothing truly meant for you will ever pass you by. And everything that has passed was never meant to stay. You start to notice how gratitude heals the small moments of your day. The traffic jam becomes time to breathe. The delay becomes space to reflect. The no becomes protection in disguise. The heartbreak becomes an invitation to love yourself deeper. Gratitude makes you an alchemist. It turns the ordinary into gold. It turns every why into thank you, every ending into a beginning, every moment into a mirror reflecting grace. And the more you live this way, the more peaceful your heart becomes. You stop chasing highs because you've learned how to live in steady appreciation. You no longer crave constant excitement because stillness itself feels like a gift. Gratitude teaches you to rest in the present, to stop waiting for a perfect someday. You realize that today, with all its imperfections, with its noise, with its tenderness, is enough, more than enough. You've learned that gratitude doesn't always look like smiling through everything. Sometimes it's just the strength to say, "I'm grateful to still be here, even when it hurts." It's the quiet resilience of waking up after the storm and choosing to love life again. It's the courage to find light in the ashes, to find purpose in the pain. Gratitude isn't denial, it's transformation. It's how sorrow turns into wisdom, how loss turns into appreciation, how fear turns into faith. When gratitude becomes your language, you become fluent in peace. You stop arguing with reality. You stop fighting for control. You trust that everything unfolds exactly as it should. Gratitude teaches you that joy and sorrow can exist in the same breath, that you can ache and still be thankful, that you can grieve and still be blessed. You start living in the beautiful tension of both, the ache and the awe, and in that space, you find freedom. Gratitude frees you from the illusion that you are missing something. It shows you that you've always had everything you needed to grow, to love, to heal, to begin again. It shifts your focus from what's gone to what remains, from what you've lost to what you've learned, from what's missing to what's possible. Gratitude teaches you to live open-handed, ready to receive, ready to release, ready to see the gift in both holding and letting go. Now, you speak differently, you think differently, you love differently. Gratitude colors every word, every choice, every breath. It has become your compass, your calm, your quiet revolution. You don't wait for life to be perfect anymore. You give thanks in the middle of it. Because gratitude has taught you the secret. Joy isn't what happens when everything is right. Joy is what happens when you choose to see everything as a gift. So if you feel the pull, don't resist it. You are not falling apart. You are unfolding. The version of you that once survived the storm is now learning to dance in the sunlight. And when you meet this new self, don't apologize for her peace, her silence, her power. Smile at the reflection that finally feels like home. Because you have not lost yourself, my friend. You've simply outgrown the cage you once called you.